Well, they tried weed killer and it didn't work. They tried pulling it up and it grew back. Now the National Park Service is trying a different tactic when it comes to dealing with invasive plant species in a new River Gorge historic district. The DEP's Mike Huff has the details.
Welcome to Thurmond, West Virginia, population 5. If you're not familiar with Thurmond, don't let the sleepy appearance fool you. This used to be a boom town. A busy hub on the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, Thurmond was home to several businesses, banks, locomotive servicing facilities, and a busy rail yard servicing more than 24 coal mines. The town's historic district is now owned by the National Park Service. The former train station, a visitor center. Aside from the occasional passing freight, these days it's pretty quiet. You could even call it a ghost town. But for the past few weeks anyway, you could also say it's a goat town. These four-legged weed eaters are taking on a hillside full of kudzu, multiflora rose, and Japanese knotweed, invasive plant species that are threatening to take over the town.
Our resource management crew has been very interested in trying to get rid of the kudzu primarily in Thurmond, and that is such a steep hillside, and putting people in there to do the work really creates a safety hazard, and they've tried it before and it really hasn't been effective. So she had seen somewhere else they were working with goats and thought that they would be a great fit for here.
The goats are owned by Larry and Ann Sahanic. We spoke to Larry by phone.
Most of our goats are what we call retired milkers and retired family goats, and are given to us by people who can't keep them because the kids aren't in 4-H, or the goat doesn't milk, or it doesn't get pregnant, or one thing or another, and for some reason they can't keep it.
Larry got into the goat landscaping business by accident. After retiring from a career in advertising, he and Ann moved to Rhinebeck, New York, where they had 7 or 8 goats. Then they got a call.
A park in New York City, adjacent to the Verrazano Bridge in Staten Island, called Fort Wadsworth, had trees whose roots were spreading the rocks on a Civil War gun emplacement. And they wanted the trees down, but their guys wouldn't cut the trees because there was thorns and poison ivy all over. So they had Cornell University contact 400 goat owners in the surrounding area, probably over 100 miles, asking if someone would come down there and eat the poison ivy and thorns. Of the 400, 8 people responded. 7 said it couldn't be done, and we went down and did it.
And so Green Goats was born. They currently have around 180 goats working in 5 states. They're wrapping up their stay in Thurmond for this year, but they'll be back next spring.
They'll make a noticeable difference. We typically bring goats in earlier in the season. We normally bring goats into a job between late May, late June, in that range, and we bring in a limited number of goats per acre, and we vary the number with the objective of having goats have something to eat until the end of the growing season, which is typically September, October, maybe down where you are, early November. And that by doing that, they're constantly stressing the plants, and the plants' root systems are stressed and compromised, and most of them don't store enough energy to come back in the spring.
The Thurmond Goat Project is scheduled to last 3 years. If the goats are successful at reducing the load of invasive plants, particularly the kudzu, the Park Service will seed the area with native grasses and wildflowers.
Once the kudzu starts growing up into the trees, it also surrounds some of the historic buildings. And so when it gets dry and it has the potential to carry fire, anything in its path is going to be in trouble. It grows so quickly that it takes over everything here. And what ends up happening is it almost forms like a mat over the landscape, and it crowds out a lot of the native species. We see it a lot in some of the historic areas, So it is a problem. If this goes well, then we're likely to use them in other areas of the park. Just with the steep topography here, the goats are definitely more sure-footed than we are. So we're looking for good things from them.
For Larry, the goats are more than just a hobby.
I'm a very realistic, older city guy who's been around a bit. But when I was in the advertising business, maybe I got you to buy more Coors than Schaefer or Budweiser. Or I got you to use the American Express card a little more than a Visa card. The bottom line is, maybe I contributed, maybe I didn't, but it was a zero-sum game. It's just one went up, one went down. All of a sudden here, and we're not saving the planet, but I'm finally doing something that really makes a difference. It's improving something. The place is ahead. It's not just one goes up, one goes down.
Larry says his goats aren't camera shy, but when we were there, well, let's just say they were focused on the task at hand, despite our best efforts.
Hey, goat.
If you go to Thurmond to see the goats, they are within a 3-acre plot, so they're not all in one area. It's almost like a wildlife watching adventure. Probably binoculars would be a great tool.
We don't call them goats rescues, but I really like goats. And I hate to see a perfectly healthy goat be sent off to the meat market. So we're giving them a purpose. They live the American dream. They eat for a living.
And from the looks of things, they love their work. In Thurmond, I'm Mike Huff for Environment Matters.
You can follow the adventures of Larry's goats by visiting their website. It's right there on your screen.